The Galactic Empire had ruled for so long that its history felt older than the stars it spanned. Entire civilizations measured their calendars by the date of their own defeat, and the idea of resistance was considered a quaint myth whispered by children. Their fleets patrolled spiral arms with clockwork precision, a living machine of power that crushed uprisings before they could bloom. Worlds that once pulsed with individuality now recited the Empire's doctrine as naturally as breathing, believing it eternal, infallible, and immune to the erosion of time. Humanity was a late arrival to this vast theater. When Imperial surveyors first encountered Earth, they barely paused to record the discovery. Their analysts called us a backwater anomaly, clever with tools but primitive, our sciences interesting for a feral species. To them we were a curiosity, a planet of tinkering primates who still argued about borders and weather while they commanded suns. That dismissive assessment became the seed of their greatest mistake. The first Imperial envoys came not with fleets but with contracts. They dangled trade rights, cultural advisors, and small pieces of technology calibrated to hook an ambitious species. Many humans welcomed the gift. Fusion cells, medical arrays, and star maps promised an end to scarcity. Yet behind the polite smiles of diplomats, others on Earth studied more carefully. Scientists catalogued every artifact, every signal, every flicker of alien protocol. Cryptographers unraveled the layered data of their so-called goodwill packages. What the Empire called benevolence, humanity called reconnaissance material. While politicians basked in alien attention, quiet councils formed beneath oceans of secrecy. Physicists compared notes with linguists, military strategists listened to network engineers. The question was never whether the Empire might tighten its grip. History made that answer obvious. The question was how to meet a force so immeasurable that direct war meant instant extinction. Humanity's answer was patience. The first lesson came from our own past. Empires fail not from a single sword but from fractures in their foundation, overreach, arrogance, dependence on systems too intricate to fail. Observers aboard covert probes began charting the Empire's lifeblood, the quantum communication lattice that bound its fleets and governors into one mind. This lattice was the key to their perfect coordination, and thus the quiet vulnerability at the heart of their dominance. Each node pulsed across space faster than light, creating a neural web that no rebellion could outmaneuver. No rebellion except one that refused to fight on their terms. Human analysts noticed subtle rhythms inside that network, like the faint hum of a living organism. Buried in the code were maintenance cycles, tiny windows of recalibration where the system trusted itself blindly. Exploiting such a rhythm would require a level of precision bordering on impossible. But humans have always lived in the realm of the improbable. Mathematicians began constructing models, not to break the lattice by force, but to mirror it, to reflect its own signals until it could no longer tell where the original command ended and the echo began. Meanwhile, the Empire pressed closer. They seeded markets with addictive technologies, destabilized governments with economic guidance, and installed advisory councils on orbital stations. Every gesture dripped with polite inevitability. Still the councils watched and waited. From secret bunkers beneath the Pacific, data flowed to encrypted relays on Luna, then beyond to listening posts disguised as mining operations. Each bit of information tightened humanity's map of the Empire's hidden anatomy. Years passed. The Empire saw a planet content to be a client state, eager for scraps of interstellar sophistication. They mistook our quarrels and noise for weakness, never realizing that the noise was camouflage. Beneath political theater, Earth's greatest minds operated with quiet unity. Nations that once mistrusted each other shared clandestine laboratories, united by a simple understanding: survival through cunning. By the time the first imperial governor proposed full integration, an invitation to adopt imperial law, humanity's plan was already maturing. Quantum simulators pulsed in subterranean chambers, running endless rehearsals of a single maneuver, a synchronized resonance that could turn the Empire's flawless lattice into an echo chamber. It would not be an attack in the traditional sense. No ships, no weapons, no declaration. Merely a reflection so perfect that the Empire's own system would drown in itself, issuing contradictory orders until its logic collapsed. The Empire believed the first stage of subjugation was complete. Their markets flooded our cities, their envoys sat in our councils, and their advisors whispered in the ears of presidents and prime ministers. To them, humanity was a species lulled by novelty, a petri dish of eager consumers blinded by glittering technology. But behind the noise of politics and trade, a different current ran silent and deep. Nations that once competed began exchanging encrypted packets of data through hidden satellite. Rival intelligence agencies pooled resources in rooms without windows. The first goal was to see everything the Empire saw, to map their every pathway of command. From Antarctica to orbiting research stations, engineers and cryptographers hunted for a single truth: how to outthink a civilization that had never lost. It began with a breakthrough in signal analysis. Our linguists discovered that the Empire's quantum lattice pulsed with subtle harmonics, microscopic phase shifts timed to cosmic background radiation. What looked like random noise was a heartbeat, a maintenance rhythm that briefly lowered the system's defenses. Those intervals lasted less than a second, but they occurred across the entire network. If a human-built signal could slip inside that breath, it might echo through the lattice like a perfect reflection, indistinguishable from its own commands. The discovery ignited a chain of collaboration unprecedented in our history. Physicists in Tokyo refined quantum mirrors to replicate imperial pulses. Mathematicians in Lagos designed adaptive algorithms that could learn from the lattice in real time. A covert lab beneath the Canadian Shield built the first prototype capable of capturing and replaying the Empire's own communication spectrum. Each piece was designed to disappear if detected, to leave no fingerprint but success. This was not sabotage by brute force, it was a game of flawless mimicry. Political unity followed technological ambition. Old rivalries dissolved under the weight of necessity. The United States, China, India, and dozens more nations abandoned secrecy between each other to keep secrecy from the Empire. They formed the Quiet Accord, an invisible alliance without borders or flag, its only creed survival through intellect. Every advance was hidden behind layers of mundane chatter, whether satellites, medical research, climate monitoring, so that even if Imperial agents intercepted transmissions, they saw only a primitive species obsessing over its small planet. The architects of the plan named it Project Mirror. Its aim was audacious: to turn the Empire's greatest strength, instantaneous coordination, into a vulnerability. Instead of striking a military blow, we would create a signal so perfectly timed and mathematically elegant that the lattice would adopt it as its own command. When the pulse reached critical synchronization, the Empire's entire network would be forced to choose between contradicting orders. It would obey both, and in that impossibility, control would unravel. But brilliance alone would not suffice. To bait the Empire into complacency, humanity projected weakness. We allowed controlled leaks of false progress, showing clumsy attempts at star travel and crude imitations of Imperial tech. We sent decoy transmissions designed to be intercepted, each one confirming their prejudice that humans were curious but harmless. The Empire's analysts, steeped in centuries of effortless dominance, read exactly what we intended: a civilization eager for guidance, incapable of subtlety. Meanwhile, specialists in psychology crafted a parallel offensive. They fed cultural trends into imperial markets, music encoded with harmonic patterns, art that carried subliminal symbols of dissent, economic models that exaggerated minor inefficiencies. Governors began to argue over resource allocations. Fleet admirals questioned each other's competence. Tiny doubts germinated in the minds of those who had never known uncertainty. What began as entertainment became quiet destabilization, a fog of mistrust that would amplify when the mirror signal finally resonated. Every calculation was rehearsed millions of times in simulations that spanned entire supercomputing arrays buried beneath oceans and deserts. Redundancy was absolute. If one nation fell, another would continue the work. If one scientist vanished, their knowledge was already replicated in hidden data vault. The project's existence was a rumor even among those who served it. No single person carried the full design. Only together could the pieces fit into the final instrument. The closer we came to readiness, the more the Empire pressed its so-called integration. Their governor proposed that Earth adopt imperial law for mutual prosperity. We signed agreements with polite smiles and hollow words, knowing that each signature bought us the time to finish the last algorithm, the final calibration of quantum mirrors. They believed we were eager for their embrace. We were timing their heartbeat. As the final parameters aligned, a sense of calm spread through the quiet accord. There would be no declaration, no heroic armada. Victory would arrive like a whisper traveling faster than light, a single echo that would make an empire doubt its own reflection. The countdown began not with a flourish but with a nod across encrypted channels. Humanity had chosen its weapon, patience sharpened into precision. In a galaxy ruled by overwhelming force, the clever had found a way to turn invisibility into power, preparing to strike with a move so elegant it would seem, at first, like nothing at all. The night chosen for the operation began without ceremony. Across hidden relays buried beneath oceans and drifting in silent orbit, the final sequence unfolded. Humanity's countless simulations had reduced uncertainty to a whisper. The signal, a lattice of quantum echoes, was not a weapon in the conventional sense. It was a flawless imitation of the Empire's own command pulse, tuned to resonate inside the infinitesimal maintenance gaps of their vast network. At the designated instant, every covert transmitter from Luna to the outer asteroid belts fired in unison. No flash of light, no roar of engines, only a tremor in the spectrum beyond ordinary senses, a ripple of mathematics that slipped into the Empire's neural web like a shadow into a mirror. Inside the Imperial lattice, the signal was welcomed as native. Their own protocols embraced it, amplifying and routing it through every node of command. Fleet admirals, planetary governors, and automated overseers received orders indistinguishable from their standard directives, except that each carried a subtle contradiction. Engines were instructed to accelerate and halt simultaneously. Supply convoys received overlapping coordinates that mapped to impossible locations. Defense platforms were told both to engage and to stand down. To the Empire's systems, these were not errors but commands of equal authority. Logic split like glass under pressure. At first the disruptions appeared as minor anomalies. A patrol fleet misjumped by a fraction of a light-year. A data archive reported simultaneous completion and failure of a critical update. Routine glitches, the kind engineers corrected without thought. But as the mirror signal cascaded through the web, contradictions multiplied geometrically. Autonomous warships lost synchronization, each interpreting the paradox differently. Some executed maneuvers that drained their reactors. Others froze entirely, awaiting clarification that would never come. The Empire's perfect coordination, its greatest strength, fractured into chaos. High Command attempted to isolate the disturbance, but their diagnostic protocols relied on the same lattice now infected with human echoes. Any attempt to countermand an order only deepened the feedback loop, as the network treated each override as another equally valid command. Messages to provincial governors collided with phantom directives, creating endless confirmation requests. The Empire's admirals, accustomed to absolute certainty, faced a labyrinth of contradictory data. In their arrogance they assumed sabotage by rival factions within their own rank. Paranoia spread faster than reason. On the Empire's core worlds, civilian systems faltered. Banking nodes calculated infinite credit loop. Planetary traffic grids issued conflicting routes that paralyzed major cities. Rumors of a coup began to race through the civilian population. Governors who had never questioned imperial authority now suspected each other of betrayal. Some declared martial law to protect their territories, unknowingly cutting themselves off from central command. Others attempted independent negotiations with neighboring sectors, believing a civil war had erupted. The very unity that had terrified the galaxy dissolved in a matter of hours. Humanity watched the unraveling through encrypted observation posts. No cheering erupted in the hidden war rooms, only silent confirmation that the plan had taken root. The mirror signal continued its inexorable propagation, each reflection reinforcing the illusion of internal conflict. Imperial fleets once poised as a single fist now flailed like uncoordinated limbs. Entire armadas disappeared into the dark between stars, chasing phantom enemies. The Empire's own citizens began broadcasting desperate appeals for guidance, but every channel carried only the endless echo of contradictory imperial orders. When panic reached the highest councils of the Empire, drastic measures followed. Central Command attempted a full lattice shutdown, but the system's design required unanimous verification from dozens of sector nodes now locked in loops of mirrored instructions. The order to disengage was itself mirrored and contradicted, creating a cascade that forced key reactors into protective stasis. Entire regions of the lattice simply went dark, leaving fleets stranded and colonies isolated. What had been a single, omnipotent entity became a patchwork of frightened outposts. The brilliance of Project Mirror lay not only in the technical execution but in the psychological trap it set. No evidence pointed to an external attacker. Every analysis of the phantom signal matched the Empire's own encryption, leading their experts to conclude that the sabotage must be internal. Factions accused one another of treachery. Old rivalries between military and administrative branches reignited. Alien species conscripted under the Imperial banner sensed weakness and began to whisper of independence. Without a single human shot fired, the Empire now faced a war with itself. As hours stretched into days, human agents seeded subtle confirmations of the false narrative. Intercepted Imperial distress calls were selectively amplified and rebroadcast to deepen mistrust. Data leaks suggested high-ranking officials had plotted the chaos as a bid for power. Each rumor, carefully timed, tightened the noose of paranoia. Worlds on the Empire's fringes declared autonomy, citing the collapse of reliable central control. Supply lines snapped as independent governors refused to obey contradictory orders. What had taken millennia to build began to crumble in less than a week. Through it all, Earth remained outwardly calm. Official transmissions carried routine scientific updates and cultural broadcasts, as if unaware of the galactic tempest. To the Empire's few functioning intelligence cells, humanity appeared as irrelevant as ever. Yet in the silent depths of secure command centers, the quiet Accord monitored every flicker of imperial confusion, ready to guide the next phase only if necessary. In truth, there was little more to do. The Empire was dismantling itself, undone by the perfection of its own architecture and the precision of a signal crafted by those it had dismissed as clever animals. By the end of the third week, the once unassailable lattice had collapsed into isolated fragments. Some sectors operated on obsolete backup systems, others retreated into self-imposed isolation to avoid the phantom commands. Fleets drifted without direction, their crews frightened and leaderless. What had been an eternal order now resembled a scattering of frightened principalities. And still not a single human warship had fired a weapon. Humanity had proven that the sharpest blade in the galaxy was neither plasma nor steel, but the quiet echo of thought sharpened to a perfect edge. Across the galaxy the silence left by the shattered lattice felt heavier than any bombardment. Entire sectors woke to a reality without orders, without the constant hum of imperial direction that had defined their lives for millennia. Merchant convoys drifted without guidance, governors discovered that their priority codes no longer reached neighboring worlds, and admirals who once ruled armadas with a thought were reduced to isolated captains unsure whether the empire even existed beyond the limits of their own sensors. The collapse was not a spectacular explosion but a steady recognition that the center no longer held and might never return. Humanity moved carefully through this vacuum. Leaders of the Quiet Accord agreed that overt celebration could invite suspicion, so Earth maintained the posture of a curious observer while preparing the most ambitious diplomatic campaign in its history. Encrypted signals leapt from hidden relays to sympathetic ears on distant worlds, carrying offers of cooperation rather than conquest. Messages were concise. We seek stability, not domination. We respect the independence of every species. We can help you maintain critical systems until you find your footing. Where the Empire had ruled through fear, humans extended a hand of partnership. The first responses came from minor trade colonies desperate for reliable communication. Within days, emissaries representing dozens of species reached out, not to a military power but to a planet that had never fired a shot in anger. They asked for guidance on rebuilding food distribution networks, on stabilizing economies, on negotiating with neighbors suddenly free from imperial tariff. Humanity offered expertise and open-source technology, never demanding allegiance. Our engineers shared algorithms that allowed local systems to operate independently, a subtle assurance that autonomy was both possible and sustainable. Word of these gestures spread faster than the remnants of the imperial fleet could react. In the absence of a commanding voice, old grievances surfaced among the Empire's subject worlds. Some border systems declared independence immediately, citing humanity's example as proof that resistance could succeed. Others sought alliances for mutual defense against the chaos. Human mediators, scientists, linguists, and cultural historians entered these negotiations not as conquerors but as equals. They brokered truces, drafted trade pacts, and quietly introduced principles of self-governance that emphasized cooperation over hierarchy. Species that had once dismissed us as primitive began to quote human philosophers and adopt human methods of conflict resolution. The idea of freedom, once considered quaint, became a contagion more potent than any fleet. Meanwhile, the Empire's core struggled to reassert control. Surviving administrators attempted to broadcast proclamations of unity, but each message was met with skepticism or outright mockery. Without the lattice, their words carried no authority. Some governors refused to acknowledge them at all, fearing the phantom signals that had already led so many ships to ruin. Others opened clandestine talks with Earth, seeking assurance that humans would not exploit the chaos. Our reply was always the same: we desire coexistence, not dominion. The absence of threat made our position unassailable. The transformation was not limited to politics. Art, literature, and music from Earth spread through newly free networks, carrying with them a spirit of curiosity and defiance. Alien poets translated human works about perseverance and imagination, finding resonance in tales of small voices toppling great powers. In marketplaces from the Orion Spur to the Galactic Rim, merchants played human symphonies and recited stories of how a once overlooked species had humbled the mightiest empire without a single battle. These cultural ripples reinforced the message that strength lay in creativity and unity, not in fleets or weapons. Within a single generation, what remained of the imperial hierarchy had withered into irrelevance. Former client worlds formed regional councils, often inviting human advisors but never human rulers. Trade flourished through decentralized agreements that treated all partners as equals. The term Galactic Empire became a historical footnote, a warning rather than a promise. Children on distant moons learned of the night the stars changed, when humanity demonstrated that intelligence and patience could rival any war machine. On Earth, the architects of Project Mirror watched these developments with measured relief. They dismantled the covert infrastructure that had made victory possible, releasing once secret technologies into public research. Nations that had joined the Quiet Accord dissolved the alliance formally, agreeing that its purpose had been fulfilled. Yet an unspoken bond remained, a recognition that in unity and subtlety lay a strength no empire could crush. Humanity had entered the galactic stage not as conqueror or vassal, but as the author of a new equilibrium. The final irony was that most imperial citizens never learned who had delivered the decisive blow. Historians in former core worlds debated theories of internal sabotage, cosmic anomalies, or divine intervention. Few suspected the quiet planet on the edge of a spiral arm, whose people had simply refused to surrender their future. For those who did uncover fragments of the truth, the reaction was not fear but admiration. To them, humanity became a symbol that even the smallest voice could rewrite destiny. As decades passed, Earth maintained its cautious stance. We built alliances founded on shared curiosity and mutual respect, expanding exploration not through conquest but through partnership. The galaxy, once a map of imperial borders, became a tapestry of diverse, self-determined civilizations. And at the center of countless new treaties and cultural exchanges, the story endured. A young species, underestimated and overlooked, had toppled a colossus with nothing more than insight, patience, and the audacity to believe that imagination could outshine brute power. In the quiet that followed, humanity claimed no throne and raised no banners. Our triumph was never about ruling stars but about ensuring that no single will could again silence the many. Where the empire had relied on fear, we offered the enduring proof that freedom, protected by wisdom and unity, was the mightiest force in the cosmos.